All right. And we don't know. Well, actually, we do know what our topic is. Give me just a sec. I just
For
don't have it
next
up
week.
yet. Yeah.
You're seeing my screen, right?
Give me just a sec. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
I think everybody is coming in and we've got our live stream going.
See my dog's tail. Oh, now she's gone now. She went under the desk. All right, everybody. Hi, how are we doing? Uh, hope y'all had a good New Year. It's been a while since I've been on the writer's lunch, so I'm happy to be back. But Shannon, did you know the topic for next week?
I do not, but I know Sean will be here later, so we'll talk about next week when he can discuss what he's going to be presenting on. But I do know on the 12th, right before Valentine's Day, we're going to have Daphne, and she is going to help us talk about writing spicy scenes. So that will be a lot of fun.
Very cool. All right, everybody. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, as you can see, today's topic is world building holidays. And I originally came up with this concept back in November, and I think various circumstances meant that I couldn't end up presenting it around the time I would like to, which was during the holidays. That's okay because I think this information is always going to be useful, and it's not been too long anyway. So we're going to go ahead and get started, but before we do, just a little bit about myself. I am Ian Michael Everett. I'm a Houston based fantasy sci fi writer. I write a superhero web serial, the Megajewel series, formerly known as Inheritors, which was a top 50 of all time web serial on Top Web Fiction. I'm an editor with the Toneworks Editing Collective, and I'm an eternal dungeon master for D&D, and I've done Muay Thai, so I have experience in martial arts if you ever need help with a fight scene. But that's enough about me. Let's talk about the holidays. So, holidays are very interesting because I think people tend to take them for granted. We have a few of them and they just kind of come and go, and they at this point, we do Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween all in a rush. And it just kind of becomes this like mush of celebration for 2 months, in which the primary mode of celebration is hanging out with your family and overeating. But I do think that these holidays offer, if you're willing to look at them and examine them a little bit more, holidays can tell us a little bit about our culture's backstory, and where our culture's headed next. So I wanted to look at kind of two main holidays as we kind of talk about, as we go over the slides and what you can do with these holidays. But the big ones, I think, at least for me, are Christmas and Halloween. And I think a lot of people can agree that those are at least Christmas is probably the number one holiday in America, and Halloween is at least top five, if not top three. But I think they provide an interesting kind of contrast to each other as we kind of go about this discussion. And, you know, they their interesting contrast has led to many media as such as Nightmare Before Christmas, but kind of kind of shows off what the holidays are about and how they can find meaning in each other. It's just kind of interesting how the culture has decided to look at these two holidays. But let's step back and say, what are these holidays about? What's the big idea with them? Why do we observe them? And what do these holidays do for us? I'm not going to answer those questions right this second, but that is kind of what I want us to keep in mind as we go forward. Just what are these holidays for? They don't just come out of nowhere. They don't just exist without explanation. They have some kind of origin and meaning for us, and there's a reason that we observe them. Um, so that in mind, I'd also like to create a new fantasy holiday called Dragon's Day. Dragon's Day, I will show you kind of what I'm talking about as we go forward. I'll do a little bit of explanation as to, how you could use these things in world building. So before I go forward, any questions, any burning thoughts?
I have some, but they're all ridiculous. Like, can I dress up like a sexy Coke can for Dragon's Day?
Sexy Coke can.
Yeah,
They don't.
because I can do that for Halloween.
You know, we'll establish some of the rituals together. I wrote down some ideas, but I'm also totally open to people offering thoughts and offering customs and traditions to go with our new fake holiday.
Yeah, my real question is, are we going to go over evolution of holidays, like how they change? Because clearly both of these holidays are really important right now, but they haven't always been, or they've been something different. And if that's something that we should also institute in our, fiction real building for holidays, or if that is just way too convoluted and unnecessary most of the time.
No, I think there's I think that's valid, and I actually do have slides on that. Primarily syncretism and how religions, or sorry, and how holidays, especially our modern holidays, kind of assimilate other cultures and traditions. So we will be going over that. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Why should we use holidays in our world building? Well, holidays can represent a lot of data in one concept. Uh, it can tell you a lot about the culture and what they find important enough to mark with a holiday. It can tell you how these people celebrate and party, what rituals they perform, what they consider sacred during this time. It might reveal religious beliefs or might be related to religious beliefs. It there will be elements in a holiday of what feelings does it engender in the community as a whole, and then what feelings does it engender in individuals, which can help you obviously with your characters, and any backstory elements and characterization that you can derive from the holidays. It can help with that. And as Shannon mentioned, it can also, holidays evolve, and holidays sometimes evolve a little bit violently, or were evolved in such a way to take advantage of cultural differences. We'll talk a little bit about where Christmas comes from. Halloween also has similar elements, but you can incorporate these kinds of stories of cultural domination and co-opting of elements from different assimilated cultures. And this can kind of feed back into the individual attitudes. You can have people who are aware of these elements, and have some strong feelings, and that can tell you a lot about a character like immediately. If they are aware of these things and have strong feelings about them, you know that they're connected to a different kind of heritage and maybe feel disconnected. I don't want to go too much into it because I actually want to go into it at the later slide, but these all of these things can tell us a lot, and you can do it with one simple concept, which is the holiday itself. You take this holiday and your imaginary holiday, or Christmas, Halloween, Dragon's Day, whatever you want to call it, and you try to answer these questions in such a way that it helps the story, obviously, because why are we world building if not for writing? I mean, obviously, if you're doing this for just world building sake, then you don't have to think about this. But if you are world building for story, holidays can do a lot for the setting, the world, and characters. So the first big thing that I wanted to touch on is what why do we make holidays? I mean, usually there is some sort of thing that we want to signify. It's kind of like the central meaning that marks a holiday that kind of what it's all, what's it for? What are people remembering? What are they celebrating? Or even in certain instances, what are they mourning? It doesn't always have to be nice and happy, but for example, Christmas, the religious center of our modern conception of Christmas. I don't want to say that that was always the case, but the modern conception of Christmas has the birth of Jesus Christ at the center. Although, evolutionary speaking, it has drifted away from that lately as it has become more commercialized and secular. Talk about a little bit about that and the syncretism and the evolution area. But you can ask yourself questions like, it can tell you that these people, for instance, if they have festivals of celebrating the solstice of winter, or what they think about the solstice of winter, or the winter solstice, what they think about the end of the harvest season, or what they think about spring. Um, you can see a lot of their attitudes towards these things in holidays. Um, could also be that they're just simply, if you have some sort of big person in your story, or some sort of big element that you want to some historical element, uh, that is something that you can draw on, and you can also bring it forward into your story, instead of just being, here's an info dump, here's, the big bad was defeated this so long ago. No, they have a holiday for when this evil was defeated, and these are all the rituals and stuff that they do, and it's so important that they have a holiday. I think that's a very easy shorthand that can get you around that kind of inorganic way of info dumping important backstory elements. This is a very organic way to do that, because people do this in real life. We have holidays for so many different things. We have Memorial Day. We have holidays for Martin Luther King Jr. We have, all kinds of days that are meant to highlight something. And so if you need to highlight something for your story, holiday is a great way to do it. Um, so what is Dragon's Day? For me, I was just kind of like, I'm riffing here. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to make a day that is crazy. But so Dragon's Day in our little made up holiday is the day that marks when humans and dragons made peace. There was some sort of big peace thing in the back. They were at war. Now they're not. Great. That's what the holiday's all about. Uh, Ryan, I like your comments on December 14th. I don't acknowledge the Gregor-Tixian calendar. It's funny. All right, I've belabored this point enough. Uh, I think another great thing that you can use holidays for is how they celebrate and party. Do people have feasts? And if so, what does extravagance look like in a feast? What foods do they bring? How do they kind of set up a feast? Does everyone go outside and, or is everyone inside by a fire? Does the food have symbolic meaning is very interesting, such as Passover has some symbolic meanings in the foods that are prepared, and the order and how it's eaten. Does these rituals of eating have meaning? Do they engage in debaucherous behavior during their holidays, or are they more reserved? It kind of can tell you a little bit if it's like, for instance, some sort of, Halloween can tend to be a little more debaucherous, because the idea of dressing up in costumes and all that stuff, people can be very excited, about dressing up as their favorite character and showing off a little bit. Meanwhile, Christmas, people probably tend to feel a little more reserved. They don't go out and, like, maybe they'll have drinks with family and give Christmas gifts, but It is not the social norm to go out and like go crazy. New Year's, absolutely. That is probably one of the most debaucherous holidays of the year. But it can tell you a little bit about like what are we celebrating and why. Christmas obviously has deep religious traditions. It's about Jesus for Christians. So because that's where that holiday comes from in modern times, you can see it in the attitudes about how people behave on Christmas. They're not trying to, you know, go out and be horny and party it up and get sloshed, although some people definitely do get sloshed on Christmas, don't get me wrong. But it's just not considered the norm as with New Year's. There's the whole idea of like you gotta kiss your partner, you gotta eat grapes under the table if you're gonna want love next year. And you go and you get drunk and fucked up, and that's fun because you're ending the year. But it can also you can look at this both from a communal perspective, but you can also look at it from the individual character's perspective. You can see how you can like take your character that you're writing about, and you can generate a lot of interesting characterization by how they engage with the social celebration aspect of a holiday. For example, if normally people are more reserved, like on Christmas, and your character is getting absolutely sloshed and doesn't care and just is just trying to be fucked up, that can tell you something about the character and how they view that holiday and just generally how they behave in general. So for our fake holiday, Dragon's Day, it is marked by symbolic dishes that represent the enemy the dragons and humans banded together to defeat. Uh, People become remarkably hedonistic on this day, indulging in large amounts of drinking, drugs, and sex. And, that it could be the opposite way, right? It doesn't have to be that, but it's just kind of for me, my logic here is that this day celebrates it celebrates peace and it celebrates life in that people banded together and stopped killing each other and decided to find peace. And so, because of that, they celebrate life and that they do all those hedonistic things and enjoy them. But, you could take that in a totally different direction. You could make this a much more solemn holiday if you wanted to. You could make it where people don't actually, they decide to fast the whole day to honor the diplomats that did not take a meal to ensure peace between dragons and humans, whatever. It doesn't, these are just the kinds of ways that this can work. So you could take it in a lot of different directions. Uh, Additionally, holidays can show you what rituals people perform. Not necessarily religious, but it probably will have some overlap. Or you could show rituals could have come from religion, but long ago divorced from their original meaning, or co-opted into new religious traditions. Um, the evergreen decorating the trees, mistletoe, holly, these kinds of things we do because they're part of Christmas, but those traditions originally came from somewhere else. Um, the rituals also can inform like the presentation of the holiday, the aesthetic, the theme of it, what's the flavor. Christmas often has very specific things. It has specific trees, specific elements like gift giving um, that only happen during this time or happen in a very certain way. Like obviously we give gifts, but we give gifts during Christmas in a very unique way. There's this idea of people invoke Santa Claus, and it's just everyone tries to get as many gifts as possible for everyone in their life, even if it's not financially feasible. um, just because that is the nature of that holiday. That's kind of the ritual of this giving that we do. um, Holidays can have like elements of sacrifice in their rituals that could tell you a little bit about the holiday and the people that celebrate it. It could be framed as sacrifice or giving offerings. There's a lot of different ways you can pull on the rituals here, and it could be as simple as people pour out a glass of wine, right, and say this is for the gods or whatever, or this is for those we have lost. These kinds of rituals, just a little bit of flavor, and how people engage with them again tells you a lot. But the big question about the rituals is what is it meant to do for the people? Obviously, Christmas's rituals are meant to invoke feelings of, comfort, feelings of charity and generosity, intimacy among your family. Um, that's the kind of ideas that's what these rituals do for people. Um, that's what we take away from it, and that's why we engage in it. So to take this idea for our fake holiday is during Dragon's Day. Dragons choose human partners to act as riders and defenders, or even make pacts of protection with an entire settlement for a certain amount of time. People will recreate the original ceremony between the peacemakers. Imagery of peace, diplomacy, and partnership among the dragons, it is common to put up figures of humans, while among the humans, the reverse is true. It'd be funny to go to a dragon's cave and see like a little like paper line of people that they have very carefully put up to celebrate their relationship with humans. Sean, you mentioned the culture novels by Ian Banks. You said they have some great made-up holidays.
Yeah, so one thing for sure, and I think you're doing a great job of talking about the differences between, I'm sorry, the relationships. Like holidays that we recognize and that your reader will recognize are a great way and a bridge to like bring in those sci-fi things. Use irony, as you said about the strings of people. I and to use relationships where people can go like, oh, this is that, and if they don't get the relation, like maybe it's a Hindu holiday that's in your background as an author, but you're transposing it onto a sci-fi or a fantasy thing. It really gives you a depth of meaning to it, and it relates to the reader in some way. So Ian Banks and the culture novel, he's a Scottish author, but he'll do a lot of oh, we're having fireworks and there's a big celebration and there's a big party, and then go into kind of the background of it. But in a lot of cases, this is characters who are traveling from one planet to another. So it gives a depth to the description of a place in just say instead of just saying, like physical descriptions, your character is experiencing something while in a certain place.
Yeah, there's a lot of power in that. I think especially for storytelling. Another element for holidays, I mean, I think this might be the overt element for a lot of people, is that it reveals religious beliefs. Holidays might overtly reference religion, like Christmas incorporates elements of Christianity revolving around the birth of Jesus Christ. And the holiday may have evolved over time to more directly reference religion, or in reverse, to become less religious and more secular over time. And we can see this with modern Christmas, which has undergone this like over the last half century or so. The external forces of capitalism have really commercialized the holiday and made it more about, they lean in on the gift giving, and it's all about selling the perfect gift, buying the perfect gift for, the person in your life. Men, you got to get them this. Women, you got to get them this. Your daughter, your wife, your dad. Everyone. There's specific gifts for everyone. And that's what Christmas, at this point, I think modern Christmas really revolves around that element. It may also only incidentally involve elements of religious belief, like Halloween, while it does have its origins in the Catholic Church and even further than that in other pagan customs, it only incidentally is thought of as religious. And in fact, such to a degree that there are many Christians that I know personally who will refuse to celebrate Halloween. But it might incidentally involve angels, spirits, and religious figures as costumes. And technically, the origins are from All Hallows Eve, which was established by the Catholic Church. But a lot of times, I do think, that somewhere in a holiday, you might find some sort of religious meaning in it, or some religious origin. Whether that is trying to, as we will talk about later, co-opt traditions from other cultures in order to provide syncretism, or just as the holiday was created, it evolved from a specific idea. That's the kind of thing I think holidays can really lean in on, especially if you typically struggle to write religion in fiction. Your holidays can illuminate that a bit. I think that's probably, kind of a obvious point, right? Because holidays, I think most of us think of many holidays as having strong religious elements, especially Christmas being the big one. Um, but, I think there are other, cultures and other holidays that you could see, that you could draw on to illustrate a culture, its religions, and its rituals. Um, there's a lot of interesting holidays, in Asia. Like Sean, you brought up some Hindu holidays. There's Eid Mubarak, uh, which involves a lot of. Uh, I'm sorry, I was thinking of the different one. I'm sorry, I was thinking of Ramadan, which is, I think, ends in Eid Mubarak, but that involves fasting until from sunrise to sunset, which is that tells you something interesting about that culture and why they do it and what it's for. Um, Dragon's Day, our made up holiday, does not directly involve religion, but it does have elements of it. The two peoples use the opportunity to offer up thanks to each other's deities and learn more about each other's religions. It's more of a political holiday like July 4th is, but it still does have some elements of it. But if anyone has an alternate explanation, I'm always willing to take it. So here's where we get to the stories of cultural domination and co-opting of elements from assimilated cultures. Christmas famously blends elements of early Christian and German pagan traditions, as well as some Roman traditions. The day of the 25th is not often literally thought of Jesus as Jesus's birthday. That I think theological scholars try to put that in like early spring, or April or May. I'm not sure the exact date, but they don't typically think of it as December. But this date was likely chosen, as thought to be adopted as a syncretic adoption of the Roman feasts, for Solus Invicti and Saturnalia. And then, kind of the elements of the holly, mistletoe, and evergreen trees were adapted from earlier pagan customs revolving around the winter solstice. Halloween itself also, so I was actually surprised to learn this, was incorporates elements from Samhain, which is an ancient Celtic holiday for the end of the harvest season and honoring the dead and celebrating new beginnings. Before Rome assimilated these customs, and then even later, the Catholic Church dedicated November 1st as All Saints' Day, making October 31st All Hallows Eve, which is where we eventually get uh, Halloween from. The Irish used to carve turnips. That's fun. Did that lead directly to carving pumpkins, or is that just
That
like
that led directly to carving pumpkins because they would carve turnips, and if you Google it,
yeah?
they are some of the creepiest looking little things for sure. But also, it was I kind of I the very communal culture of like in general, if you were in Ireland back in medieval or earlier times, I that if a traveler came, you gave them food and drink, and that was just kind of like a given culturally. And so it's very interesting that in this Halloween, we say, oh, go around and get candy from all of your neighbors, essentially. And it is very much, coming from this older idea that was much more widespread, but still survives in America to this day with so many different little things, on that.
Yeah.
Ghosts, very much the will-o-wisps,
Mhm.
that were caused by releasing gases from bogs that would ignite spontaneously, and would just be like, a flash of light or a ball of light, in the dark, in the middle of the night, and it's like, okay, this really translates to what we think of as, modern, I uh, accoutrement of Halloween for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, this is the kind of area of conversation about holidays I think is for me the most interesting because you can do a lot of world building with this idea. You can do a lot of you can talk a lot about the conflict and tension between a dominating culture and the dominated oppressed culture. Um, you can do a lot of really quick and deep, I'll say, because I think this is the kind of area that it's so deep that people that participate in these holidays don't even really often think about where these elements come from. But if you do, you can really do a lot to establish relationships between different cultures.
So, Ian, if I can pop in again about the culture novels, and I tried to look it up real quick and see if I could find a wiki, but it wasn't there. It was so nice in some of them to be reading about, like, oh, said such and such characters traveling on a spaceship, they land on a new planet. Okay, and in the process of that, they land on, some holiday feast day, and as somebody is, feeding them purple tomato sprites, like a certain food, I that is particular to the holiday or something like that, then they're kind of recounting where the holiday came from, and it gives you a really short, curt explanation of a bit of history from a place. That's terribly interesting to me to use a holiday as a really good shorthand. I just very explosive instead of launching into a long history that interrupts your narrative for sure.
Yeah, it is one of those tools in your toolkit that can do a lot of world building really fast, as opposed to, like you say, a cumbersome info dump. Um, So, in our example, I'll say the Dragon's Day, for me, when I wrote my ideas out, was Dragon's Day has customs that come from the unwilling peoples, those who refuse to make peace with the dragons. Over time, these people were conquered by the draconic kingdoms, and various holidays and feasts were kind of incorporated to make this transition easier for these people that were conquered. So also a little bit about community, and this is kind of I think an interesting point. But it's distinct from the partying, the celebration, the social aspect of it. For me, this is more about what elements of the holiday kind of draw out community support. What does it inspire in people? Like for example, Christian or Christmas often engenders charity through various donation drives, like the Salvation Army doing the little, you'll see them oftentimes outside of grocery stores, and people just have a general attitude of generosity during this time that I think it kind of wells up and becomes more pronounced than normal during Christmas. And you also you have questions of how do families come together? What does it look like when people come together to celebrate? What's the social structure of that within like a family or a small unit? Um, Questions you can ask yourself: do people set aside negative feelings for the sake of social cohesiveness? Like for example, we joke a lot about going to Christmas or Thanksgiving with your racist uncle and having to make peace and not really get it too into it. This is a pretty, common trope. But because of that trope, you can ask yourself, well, is there anything similar to that in this holiday? Do people kind of use that holiday to strengthen their family bonds and set aside, feuds, bad blood, that kind of thing? Um, for Dragon's Day, I said, people use this time to feed and shelter the needy, and estranged family sets aside bad blood. So much so that people have a name for the act of forgiveness during Dragon's Day, ripping the broken scale out. Um, I couldn't think of anything. I'm sure that there is something that is similar in a modern holiday. I just couldn't think of it off the top of my head. But I think this community element is also something that can be useful, especially as it relates to the individual, which is I think this is where the world building meets the character. This is where it meets the story, in my opinion. You get individual attitudes and backstory elements that can impact your POV characters. Holidays can mean various things to different people. Christmas can evoke feelings of warmth, comfort, intimacy, and love, but can also evoke strong feelings of grief, resentment, and anger for people that are far away from their family, or if their familiar relationships are strained. Their parents are divorced. They have an abusive father, something like that. These elements can make a holiday that is meant to revolve around family very painful for these kinds of people. Halloween also evokes complex feelings. I personally grew up around it. Religious folk who feel that the holiday is demonic in some way. I actually had lots of friends who were not allowed to participate in Halloween because their families felt it was satanic in some way. But even outside of that, you can see this idea has blended into the kind of modern secular version where people have these like strange ideas of like people handing out drugs or poison at instead of candy. They think there's like, and I'm not saying these things have not happened in the past, but like there's like these widespread tales of people in every neighborhood, kids getting horrible candy, or horrible stuff instead of candy. But the idea here is just to don't just look at the positive of a holiday. Look at the negative feelings that a holiday can evoke, because that can do a lot for a character. It can, you have a character who has a sad orphan backstory. Do you and there are some days where people do sit around and go, man, it sucks that I have this bad, sad, tragic backstory. But it's easier and more organic to have an event that is drawing those feelings out of them, making them more pronounced. A random Tuesday is not often, the day that you just spontaneously, or rather, it's not a day that reads very well in a story as being the day that evokes these emotions out of people. But a holiday coming around can absolutely feel like an organic uh uh what's the word I'm looking for, connection to these feelings. It's always a relative though, especially with Christmas. I think Christmas is probably the strongest catalyst. Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. But I posted there's a song I really like by Jonathan Colton, who's the guy who did the songs for the Portal games. He has a song called Christmas is Interesting, and the lyrics go, Christmas is interesting like a knife in your heart. Christmas is interesting how it tears you apart. Christmas is interesting like a stick in your eye. It's so freaking interesting that it might make you cry. I think that's just, there are people that feel that way about Christmas, and there are some people that feel that way about Christmas one year, and then the next year they feel like it's a great, wonderful holiday. So it's just, you can show a lot of evolution of characters through this kind of attitude. For example, Scrooge. Scrooge is like, his arc is summed up and his whole story revolves around the holiday. But that's a very apt example of someone who's, you can mark their character growth by how they feel about the holiday. It's fairly perfect example. But it is easy shorthand for how you can see somebody grow. So my last bit about Dragon's Day, it was Dragon Day. Dragon's Day brings forward feelings of being dominated amongst humans, as if the only way they could have survived is by making peace. Meanwhile, many dragons wonder why they have to bow and make peace with small, weak creatures. Not only this, but the communal nature often leaves outcasts and misfits feeling unwelcomed, and the lonely resent the feasts among friends and the sex among lovers. Just kind of an example of how these negative feelings can be drawn out. But that kind of brings me to the end of my points. We still have a little bit of time left. So I hope that through some of these questions, you can see how holidays are useful for world building. So I want, now like that we've looked at these, we looked at real holidays, we looked at our fake one. Think about your favorite fictional holiday. Like Sean, you brought up the holidays from the culture novels, but what does it do for the world building of the story? Does it provide a lot of information that is really quickly available and can tell the reader a lot in a short amount of time, or is it just there to sell merchandise, such as Star Wars Life Day? But yeah, so I'm gonna open it up. People want to talk about some of their favorite fictional holidays and what that means for them and what they think it did for the story. I'd love to hear about some of the ones I haven't thought of. Some of the holidays I was thinking about when I wrote this, I definitely thought of Beltane from the Wheel of Time, which was basically just Christmas, if I remember right. Uh, but it was referencing a real holiday, but it had like Christmas traditions because it was like celebrated during Christmas, if I remember right. I might be misremembering though. Maybe it was a spring thing.
Not exactly the same, but I V for Vendetta. The comic book and the very different movie, which turned out to be much more about America. But they used Guy Fawkes Day. And
Yeah,
so in creating this fiction, they used a historical example and a holiday to kind of frame their story. The story goes from one Guy Fawkes Day to the next year, what is it, November 17th or something like that. And that's the time period in which the story takes part, and it very much draws a metaphor off of that. So it's a holiday that we're familiar with, or might not be familiar with, because it's kind of a minor holiday in England, and that's about it. I but uses that to create a new drama, and I would wonder how much I Alan Moore really thought about Guy Fawkes Day and then created the story, or was working on the story and was like, "Oh, this is a good frame for it." You know, what came first, chicken or the egg?
yeah, that's an interesting idea. It's not. I mean, and this could be like if you subbed in Guy Fawkes for like another revolutionary character. I know we don't have like a John Brown Day, but like we should. Uh,
Yeah, that's interesting. I love that.
yeah, it's just like those kinds of you could have translated it to other ideas. Uh, but knowing Alan Moore, I don't know. But I mean, it's also like we talked about Scrooge with Christmas. They're using a real holiday, which I think you could absolutely use a real holiday, especially if you're writing, modern sci-fi, something like that. You could use a real holiday, and you could even extrapolate how that holiday evolves. Like it'd be interesting to see someone write a story about how I'm sure this probably exists, how Christmas has evolved over, the next 1,000 years or so, and what it looks like in the age of space travel. Could be a very interesting idea.
Now you're making me think like Die Hard, like what space movie is actually a Christmas movie? And there's got to be one. Like there's got to
Yeah.
be, Lost in Space has Christmas in it or something like that.
Let's see here. I feel like I remember. Does the Fifth Element have any holidays in it, or am I just like misremembering?
I don't think so. No. Good idea though.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking of the cruise they go on, but I don't think it. Yeah, 1984. They have something about the founder.
Founders Day or something like that, and it probably
Yeah,
replaced all the other holidays or something. Yeah. And that's very Soviet, you know. I mean, the idea of a culture, changing the names of cities and stuff like that, like erasing history. Not exactly holiday related, but still.
yeah. I was thinking. So Beltane is in the Wheel of Time. It represents the end of winter, so they celebrating spring's arrival. But I'm fairly certain that it was it's pretty derived from the concept of Beltane from Gaelic culture, and that in its of itself was a world building element. It's not He didn't simply just steal from it. There's a whole meta narrative in the Wheel of Time about time being cyclical, and at some point their world is our world before it revolves back to fantasy world.
Well, we'll see if it gets represented. Wasn't Wheel of Times optioned, like lately or something? They want to make a series out of it.
Oh, they made a series on Amazon, but it got dropped.
Oh, it did already happen. I missed it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Season 3 was the last one. I don't think they're gonna pick it up again.
No, now they're gonna try with Brandon Sanderson and Mistborn.
Yeah, yeah. That's the next big fantasy thing. Well, I don't. This is a little shorter today, but I don't have a lot more to say. If anyone else does, but if not, as they say in corporate world, you can have your 10 minutes back. Sean, I do know. What are we doing next week? I believe you're the one that's doing that.
I don't have it in front of me, I unfortunately, but yes, I will be here to talk about I something terribly interesting, absolutely, and I as we're working on things, I always know that here at Writers Lunch, we're going to try and help you write better books and get ideas, gather things, and share them with each other. Absolutely. You can always check us out. We have our Discord. You can look that up through any of our links on tomeworksedits.com, and find out the things we have coming up both in Houston and in Dallas.
Very cool. Well, all right, everybody. Thank you
Awesome.
for spending your lunch with us. Hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much, Ian.
Yeah.